All right, so let's change the interface on this one to just, I think, NAT. Then 0 to 15. Ping it. Okay, so now I can ping. Let's go to the other one. Hmm. So 10.0.2.4. One can ping, but not the other one, right? Let's see. I'm if config 10.0.2.15, and I can actually ping 10.0.2.4 from 10.0.15, but I can't from the other one. So actually, I think they do have network connectivity. Would you agree? So what this might be is it could be a firewall issue, maybe, you think? So how do I debug for that? And so we're kind of trying to solve this problem. So what comes to, you see what I'm saying? So if I do, like I don't, I'm looking at it. I know that this is 10.0.2.15. I know that from here, I can ping 10.0.2.4, no problem, which means, uh, that works. There is some network connectivity. So then I go to this one, and this is 10.0.2.4, and I ping 10.0.2.15, but it's not responding. So the first thing that I'm going to do to troubleshoot in something like Linux is I'm going to turn off the firewall. Let's see what happens. So what do I need to do that? So I go to 10.0.15, and I'm going to say sudo, because obviously it needs permissions, UFW disable. So firewall stopped and disabled on this system startup. So this is part of actually the commands for this week. So I don't know if this will work, but let's take a look. So again, 10.0 to ping 10.0. Okay, so that this has been working. So now I'm going to go to the other VM. This one, which doesn't want to cooperate. This is 10.0.2.4. Still not. Firewall is off. I'm going to switch the interface. I'll switch back to NAT network just to see what happens. Select that as NAT network. I have 10.0.2.4. Still there. Still nothing. Just a NAT network. Only one NAT network. Okay. It's got an IP 10.02.15. Can still ping 10.0.2.4. Ah, there we go. So now it works. You see, so this is kind of how you have to play with this, okay? So I ended up putting them back on NAT network. Um, they are pinging between each other. Does this make sense, guys? This is one of the issues that you'll run into, unfortunately, sometimes, but at least you've seen an approach on NAT network. They put them on NAT network, check that they both have IPs and ping between them. Okay, got it? Everyone with me? Now the UFW, not sure if that had anything to do. Another thing, see where you have this triangle of three little squares over here? That's the network. So sometimes you can go in here, go to the wired connection, and you can say something like turn it off and then turn it back on. And that what that might do sometimes is it allows it to like reset. It's almost like, resetting the computer or restarting the computer or something like that, so that the thing takes effect and it's not based on like the memory of it. Do you guys understand? Any questions on this? This is usually the hardest part. Like if you get the machines to do this every time, then you're ready for the lab. Okay. But don't do the labs if this doesn't work, because nothing will work, especially when you're dealing with two VMs. So let's go back then. Let's see now. Let's try it again. Give it one last try. So ifconfig 10.0.2.4. Okay. So I'm on like the original seed, I believe. Let's go to the other one, 10.0.2.15, I assume. You can see that. 10.0.2.15. All right, let's give it one last set of pings. So pinging 10.0.2.4, it works. Pinging 2.15, and it works, right? So this is the one that was giving us a problem. All right, so now let's go back to that, see if that firewall command that I ran had an effect. So as I said, the Linux default firewall is called the IP tables. It's an extremely powerful firewall for sure that we will discuss later, but there's, it's kind of somewhat complex. So I believe because of that, they created UFW, as the name implies, the uncomplicated firewall. And it's just meant to be a command line, much simpler syntax to get the firewall up and running. So let's take a look at, that's kind of what we can look at today. So we have two VMs, right? And I have essentially here the document with the bullets. So what is UFW? Is the uncomplicated firewall. If, it should be installed by default, but, sudo apt-get install, UFW, GUFW. So we have the first two commands that we want to learn about are sudo UFW enable and sudo UFW disable. There's also a third command which gives us information about the status, and this one, sudo UFW status. So those three commands I'm going to play with right now. I'm going to go ahead here. So this is the clone, I think. This is my designated, 215. So I'm going to say sudo UFW. Here we do need sudo most of the time, as we are interacting with, obviously, something that provides, strict security for the system. So I'm going to say sudo UFW status. Inactive. You see that? So the firewall is turned off. All right. So what do you guys know about firewalls, right? So firewalls have they're basically a mechanism so that it's all about port numbers, right? So if a program initiates sending packets from inside the computer, then it's going to let them through, right? So that, we've done this with SCAPI, for instance, ping, etc. Anything that we initialize on the computer, it goes out. But things that initialize outside of the computer, like another computer pinging us or another computer trying to SSH, that's where it's going to hit the firewall, right? Unless we open a port or unless we have rules, etc., to let things in. Does that make sense? That's essentially what this is. I did provide a set of slides and notes in this repo, so go ahead and read through all of that. All right, so let's just play with these three commands then. So I'm going to go here. All right, so the firewall is inactive, so I'm going to turn it on. So sudo UFW enable. Okay. All right, firewall is active and enabled on system startup. I'm going to do status. You can see it says it's currently active. This is important. So let's see now what rules it has in place. Maybe it allows ping through, maybe it doesn't. Part of the lab is to show you how you can change that setting. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. A lot of the time, everything we do is going to be pinging just to see if it works. So I'm going to ping 10.0.2.4. I can ping it just fine. It initializes from here. Now go to 10.0.2.4. And 0.2.4 over here. All right, so this is 10.0.2.4. I'm going to ping 10.0.2.15, and I can ping. So even though the firewall is on, it's not blocking ping, for instance, right? So that's good. All right. Anyway, so that's kind of the idea. Now let's check the firewall on this one. So sudo UFW status. Inactive. So this firewall is also off. So I'm just going to turn it back on. All right. Oh, so you can see this one. This is probably from last semester, last year. These are all the rules that I have in there. All right. So these are from the lab essentially. But this is what it's going to look like once you start adding rules in there. The idea is going to be you have to, from, and then the action to take, whether allow or deny specific network traffic. Okay. So that's kind of the idea. All right. So it is enabled. So let's go ahead and hit clear here. All right, so let's go back to the Word doc and read through it. All right, so we're talking about the UFW firewall. So get the firewall software. So make sure you have it. What is UFW? It's the uncomplicated firewall. Enable, so learn how to do that. Starting and stopping the SSH service. So that's what I wanted to do first, right? So we all know that we have all these services on operating systems and they're all tied to different port numbers. So SSH is tied to port 22, which is a secure tunnel. So let's go ahead, before we block it, let's try to SSH between the machines, right? And if SSH is not enabled, we'll do sudo service SSH start. So I'm going to go to 10.0.2.4. Hit clear here. /L. Clear. Now I'm going to move this stuff. All right, so I have config. So I'm going to SSH into 10.0.2.15. All right, so it's taking a long time, which tells me that that service is probably not running on the other VM. You can see it takes too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable it first. And of course, we need to enable these services so that we can, in a lot of these labs, you need to show, okay, I can connect to this service. Then I added this firewall rule, and now I can't, right? So that's kind of the idea. So I'm going to 10.0.2.15 now, and I'm going to just look at some of the status of this. So I'm going to do sudo netstat dash na pipe grep TCP. Okay, so you can see here port 22 seems to be open. So let me try to connect from this one to the other one. So I'm going to do SSH. The firewall is off on this. So SSH seed at 10.0.2.4. See, there we go. So this one worked. Okay, so this, when you get this, it's trying to do like a handshake and exchange the keys basically. So you just hit Y, enter. Oh, okay, yes. And now, as you guys can see, I need to type the password. So that's these. Okay. So here we are. So now if I do ifconfig, you can see that it says that my IP is 10.0.2.4, not 10.0.2.15. And that's because I have SSH into the other machine. Does this make sense, guys? Yeah. So what I'm thinking is that on the other, SSH definitely works on 10.0.2.15 and also on 10.0.2.4, but I may have a rule in there that's blocking me. Do you see that? So let's take a look. I'm going to now exit out of SSH, and you can see it says connection closed. So if I now do ifconfig, you can see I'm back to being 10.0.2.15, right? Okay. So how do let's go back to 10.0.2.4. All right, so I'm in 10.0.2.4 here. ifconfig 10.0.2.4. I'm going to try once again to SSH into seed at 10.0.2.15. So it does not want to allow it. Right? So what's the problem? Ping again. 10.0.2.15. I can ping it, so I definitely have connectivity. I feel that port 22 is open on the other machine. I was able to use the SSH service. So how do I find the problem? Do you guys understand? So let me look at something. So I'm going to do sudo UFW status. Oh. All right. So obviously there's a whole bunch of rules here, right? What does it say? It says port 22 allow to, anywhere. Deny 80. 443, allow anywhere. Port 80, 443. So if I'm going to 22, okay. Well, one of the things I can do is just turn off this firewall, right? So sudo UFW disable. Okay, now sudo UFW status. It's inactive, so now let's try it. Man, it still does not. Take a look at sudo UFW status. It's active, so I'm going to turn this off. All right, so it's off. It's inactive, right? Let's try it yet again. Still ping. Ah, there we go. Finally. So password for this is these. Ha, Eureka, right? So we got it. So clear. How do you know that you're on that machine? ifconfig. So this should say what? 10.0.250. You guys understand? So I had to turn off both firewalls, and this is just me debugging. So this is kind of like just network debugging on Linux, dealing with the problems. Obviously, disabling both firewalls has security concerns, but it allows you to at least make sure you have connectivity before you turn them on, and then you know exactly what rules you need to have in place for them. Got it, guys? This is pretty important actually because, you know, I would recommend always being able to come back to a state where you can ping and communicate between the two machines before you do the lab assignments. And you think that maybe your solution is not working, and it's actually a network connectivity issue. All right, great. So we've established that we can talk between the machines, that we can SSH and so on. So I'm going to exit. It closes the connection. So if I do ifconfig now, it says 10.0.2.4, so I'm back where I need to be. Any questions? All right, great. So we've established that connectivity and everything. Let's go back to the Word doc for the homework assignment this week. All right, so we kind of looked at this, ifconfig, sudo service ssh start, sudo uf. So let's read through it. So now, as we start adding rules into UFW and into IP tables, so for instance, we would do things like sudo UFW allow 22. So this is essentially saying we allow SSH on through the firewall, right? So you guys know what a port is. So we played with this idea of getting the IPs of the network mask, seeing if you have access through the firewall. So that's what we've been trying to establish. Sudo UFW deny. So that's, allow or deny. That's where you start adding rules to block things. Now, this is important. To remove a rule, use delete followed by the rule you want to do. This is similar to how Cisco does it on Cisco systems or whatever. You always put like no in front of the line. So in this case, to remove a rule, use delete followed by the rule. So sudo UFW delete and the rule. So let's test that out. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 10.0.2.4 where I know I have several rules. So I'm going to do sudo UFW status. Okay, I'm going to turn it back on. ifconfig 10.0.2.4. This one has all the rules. And I type so sudo UFW enable. Okay. Sudo UFW status. All right. And now we're going to try to delete some of these. according to the document, we do sudo UFW delete. So sudo UFW delete, and then one of the rules. So let's say I'm going to delete deny 80, right? So okay, it says it's deleted, so let's try it. As you can see, that rule is gone. Okay, let's try another one. Deny 443. Okay. Print it. So you can see that one's gone, is gone too, right? And then these two allowed 22s, can get rid of them. Allow 22. Okay. We have another allowed 22, so let's get rid of that one. Okay. Okay, so that, okay, what? I didn't put the delete, did I? Say that again? Yeah, I forgot delete. So yeah, all right, so they're gone now. So you can see that that's kind of the functionality of it. I just happen to have you wouldn't have all these rules. I just had them from last semester, but it makes sense. It's an example to get rid of them. So got it, guys? So that's essentially the command. So you have status, enable, disable, and then you have a way of adding the rules, and then you have a way of deleting the rules. You have to really think about how to implement a rule. Um, you you have to kind of think of yourself as the firewall, and you're looking at the packet, right, as it's coming, in front of you, and you have to kind of determine if it's going out of the computer or if it's coming from outside into the computer. So that's also really important, to try to conceptualize how that works. Okay. So that's what makes adding firewall rules a little bit harder is, thinking about that. But that, we'll play with those ideas. All right. So let's keep going. So let's go back to the Word document. Actually, I'm just doing a high level now, and then we can start playing with this. So you can see the commands enable, disable. There's a etc.ssh file that you'll have to work with. There's sudo UFW status verbose, so that's a new command. Let's take a look at that one. So sudo UFW status and status verbose. And essentially, it just provides a little bit more, as verbose indicates, it provides a little bit more information. Now, this is important here because it says that the default is deny incoming, allow outgoing, and deny routed, right? So this is not a router, but the IP tables, as I said to you guys before, can be used for, as a router as well, and it's not actually super hard. And you can test that out with something like a Raspberry Pi. But anyway, so that would be, IP tables is designed actually to be used both as a router or as a local machine. In our case, our seed VM is just a local machine, so this is a local firewall. But here's, it allows everything initiating from the computer, and it blocks everything incoming that initialize on the outside. All right. So that's some commands there. All right, so we looked at that. You can take a look at the configuration file, which, as you can see, as we have learned in the class, most configuration files are in the etc folder, right? So the UFW has its own. This is the setup, the syntax. So this syntax that you're looking at here, this is the IP tables syntax, okay? So when we go to the UFW file, the way it is written inside, it is written in IP tables syntax. So what this set of commands is telling you is that you accept ping packets. But in this problem, what you guys will do is you will change this accept to drop, and therefore you will block off ping packets. So it's one way of configuring things. So instead of adding a command, you will just go directly into the firewall configuration file. Make sense? All right, so we've got, now here's an interesting new command. We have how to block or allow, deny or allow, based on an IP address instead of a port number. You can see that here. So UFW deny from IP, UFW allow from IP. So that's a new set of commands. Then we're getting into the netcat utility. This is a really nice one that we're going to play with. It's basically how to establish a tunnel between two computers. It's like SSH essentially, but unencrypted. All right, so we'll do an exercise with netcat. I always like to create like a little chat with netcat, so we'll talk about that. All right, so that's this one. And then, yeah, this is all netcat. Scripting, we'll do some scripting problems. So hopefully I'll create a new problem for this one. Or I guess I created some last. So I'll add maybe one or two problems. But anyway, that's the lab, okay? So as you can see, the commands are pretty straightforward. And yeah, that's, IP tables is a little bit harder. So on Wednesday, I'll probably go over IP tables and just kind of give you a little bit more insight into it. But today, I just wanted to introduce the UFW commands for the interface to quickly get up and running. Are there any questions before we begin going through the lab assignment? No questions? All right, so yeah, let's just keep going then. All right, so I think we've done, we have a VM, we've established connectivity. All right, so we're going to start SSH. So open a port for SSH, sudo UFW, allow 22. Okay. So I'm going to go to the VM here. I'm going to do from 10.0.27, that doesn't sudo, let me delete it. UFW, delete, deny from. Okay. Okay, so that one's gone. I'll delete that last rule. Sudo UFW, delete, deny from 10.0.2.7. Okay. All right, so there are no rules on this firewall, and I believe there are no rules on the other one. This is important, actually, when you're dealing with firewalls. The firewalls are kind of sequential, right? So if you hit one, you're and you like if it's a set of if statements, right? So if it's like if this is true, it just execute on that one and it doesn't continue with the rest. So this might be a confusing thing when sometimes you put in a whole bunch of rules and you think that it's going to look at all of them. It's not. So it's a pipe essentially. And think of it, if it hits this one, it just goes through that, okay? So that's why I deleted just now all the rules, because sometimes you put in a rule and later you add another rule that should have come before, but if it comes after, it may never get to it, right? So you have to really think about that. Does that make sense? So that's important, right? So that's why I did that, because then we'll spend a long time trying to figure out why. All right, so I'm going to do sudo UFW disable, status. All right, so this one is inactive currently, but let's take a look at the first problem. So I get my feeling with the first problem is you want to show that SSH works, right? And then you add a rule and now it doesn't work. That's essentially what's going on, something like that. So let's read through this. So we did install the firewall. What is UFW? Enable the firewall. Start and stopping a service. So we know SSH works. So we've established that. Open a port for SSH. Okay, so that's the first thing. So it would be sudo UFW allow 22. You have to think from what machine you're going from, initiating into which machine, and all of that. So what is port 22? Port 22 is the port associated with SSH. What is a port? You guys know that. KIF config, get your IP address. What is an IP? Subnet mask. When I say PuTTY, I just mean use SSH. See if you have access through the firewall. Okay. Now close port 22 on the firewall. So that's another thing we can do. To close a port, sudo UFW deny 22. SSH with PuTTY again. Sudo UFW status. What happens? Now open the port again. To remove a rule, use delete. To disable and enable, I've shown that. All right, okay, so I think until point 30, bullet 30, is really just one problem. Do you guys understand? It's just essentially SSH and then show evidence that you can block through the firewall, and that's it. So let's do that scenario before we move to 31 to 37, which seems to be a little bit different. So let's go here. So what I'm going to try to do, we're going to think of a scenario, an example of SSHing from one to the other, enable the firewall, and allow and deny and all. Let's go ahead and do that. So currently, we need to know what the status is. So where are we? Let's start complete example. So IF config. All right, so this is 10.0.2.4. Okay. So sudo UFW status. It's active. Okay. So I'm going to sudo UFW disable it. All right, so this one is stopped. Now I'm going to go to 10.0.2.15. IF config 10.0.2.15. There it is. Sudo UFW status inactive. So this one's off. All right. So we should be able then from one to the other to connect. And so this is the most unrestricted access we have, right? So everything is open and disabled essentially, right? And what we're going to try to do is we're going to start to lock it down, right? But right now, this is the most open. So IF config 10.0.2.4 SSH seed at 10.0.2.15. Okay, and we can get in. Perfect. Do IF config. So that's 10.0.2.15, unrestricted access, right? Obviously, that's insecure on the internet. So we don't want to do that. 10.0.2.4. All right, so what we would want to do is instead, we would want to have the firewalls enabled on both. So that's the next step. So sudo UFW enable. All right, so this one is enabled. Now I'm going to go to 10.0.2.15. Okay, so they're on. So now I'm going to repeat the exercise of SSHing, but now I have the firewalls on. So let's see what happens. Okay, whoops. So now I'm going to do the same thing, SSH seed at, and let's do ifconfig just to make sure. All right, so I'm on 10.0.2.4, SSH seed at 10.0.2.15. And you can see it's not letting me in. Can you guys see that? So that's a problem. So how do we solve this? Obviously, the firewalls are on, but we're going to have to add a rule that lets us in. So here's the question for you guys. Like this is an exam type question, right? So what do I do here? Where, I have two machines, and obviously if the firewalls are off, SSH does not work. If the firewalls are on, if the firewalls are off, SSH does work. If the firewalls are on, SSH does not work, right? I want to keep the firewalls on both machines. I want to initialize SSH from 10.0.2.4. What do I do? Yeah, please. Pardon? Where? Well, we want to do we want to be very secure, right? So we don't just want to open ports everywhere. So let's think about how firewalls work, right? So if something initializes from inside going out, then everything's allowed. So that means that 10.0.2.4 should work, right? Because we're starting the SSH from 10.0.2.4. So the problem might be at 10.0.2.15 because it's a different machine and someone is trying to SSH into it, right? So maybe what we should do is just open one port on 10.0.2.15, port 22. Does that make sense? Yeah. Do you guys understand? Yeah. So let's try that. So we know that I'm in 10.0.2.4 here. I want to connect to 10.0.2.15. It's not currently letting me. I want both firewalls to be as restrictive as possible. And I don't want to add rules that I don't need to have in there, right? That might create insecurity, etc. So this is called device hardening, if you guys remember. So it's just keep it as robust as possible. So what I'm going to try to do first, what makes sense to me, is I'm going to go to 10.0.2.15, this one. Oops. Okay, 10.0.2.15. And I'm going to try to add a rule for this. So I'm going to do sudo UFW status. Okay, I know it's active. Now I need to add some rule. Sudo UFW, let's do verbose. All right, so you can see it's enabled. Incoming is denied, right? So incoming is denied. So we need to basically allow something through. Let me check something else. I'm going to do netstat -na pipe grep TCP. You can see port 22 is enabled. I haven't turned off this service, in fact. When the firewalls are off, the service works. So even though the service is working, I still need to punch a hole through this firewall on port 22. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So sudo UFW, what? Allow 22. You guys see this? So let's try this one. All right, so I added that rule. Now sudo UFW status verbose. Okay, so it says here 222 allow in, that's important, right? So by default, it's allowing in from anywhere, right? We could restrict this to be a specific IP address, etc. But for now, we're just saying 22 allow in from anywhere. All right, so how do we know if it works? Let's try it again. So we go over here, hit clear, and we want to check the IP. IF config 10024. So we want to SSH into 10.02.15. There you go. Okay. So now I do IF config, and I am in 10.02.15. Make sense? So that's how it works, right? So you can see you have the two firewalls enabled. By default, I assume your firewalls are off probably. If you have a default CVM, the service is running, but you still have to open that one port. If you notice, I didn't have to open ports everywhere, just on the specific machine, just because when traffic initializes from one machine going out, it's allowed. But it's when traffic is coming in from the outside, it's all blocked by default, as we saw. And so we have to start adding these exceptions. And once you start adding multiple exceptions, you have to be careful about the order in which you enter the rules, as that can cause problems. All right, so that completes bullets 1 through 30 of the lab assignment, right? So what do you have to show in your screenshots? You have to show essentially what I did. SSH first when the firewalls are off, you can get in. Show the IP. Then turn the firewalls on, so show that command as well. Then try to SSH again. You won't be able to access it, right? And then you have to add the rule, right? Once you've added the rule, then you try it again and it should work. So you just have to show that sequence of it works, it doesn't work, it works, it doesn't work. And just document that really well. Any questions on the first 30 bullets? Fun stuff, right? All right. So we are currently on I've SSH, I believe. So I'm going to do exit. So now I've closed the connection. I should be back at 10.024. So I have I'm back at 10.024. I can check the virtual machine, this one here, and you can see that I have that rule in and everything works nicely. So I'm going to go back. So we've completed everything until about here. And also this does recommend whenever you add rules, do sudo UFW enable disable. That's a good thing. Sometimes it may take a little bit for something to take effect. So it makes sense to just like turn it off and turn it back on. It's just something that I have noticed in the past. Questions? All right, so let's look at the next 7 bullets from 30 to, or next few bullets from 30 to 41. Okay, so it says 31. Root access via SSH can also be changed in a file called sshd config. Okay, so if we find that file, we can nano it, and there's going to be a flag or something that says permit root login, and you establish, you set it to no. So this just shows the firewall. So log in as root, what happens, and then, yeah. So this is just showing that it goes back to the discussion, right? That in Linux, they don't really like it when you use the root account. Okay, that's not something that they like you using, and because of accountability, right? So it's better just to use accounts from the sudoers group, so you can essentially turn this off. So I'm going to go into etc SSH. I'm going to pick my 10 serial 215. So obviously also the root account needs to be enabled, but for it to work fully. So I'm gonna go to, it says cd s at etc ssh. All right, so we are in that folder, pwd. Okay, now we can do ls-l. And there are some files in there, in fact, and it says one of them is ssh config. We went here, now we look at this file, ssh dconfig. Okay, so this is root owned, so we're gonna need the sudo privilege. So sudo nano ssh d config. Okay. And we're looking for permit root login. Could be commented out. But you can see this has a lot of settings. Okay. Related to the SSH service. Where? Where? You're gonna, oh, okay. Ah, there it is. Okay, so here it says permit root login, prohibit password. So this has got some kind of a policy, but let's go ahead. I'll leave that one because I don't want to delete it. So, or lose that information. So I'm going to say permit root login. And we're going to say yes, right? So that's kind of what the problem is getting at, that we're going to allow root or block it. Okay, so let's read through the document. So it says, go to that, change permit root login to no or yes. And then we're going to try to log in, see what happens. Permit root login, yeah. All right, so let's try that. So I'm gonna, so permit root login, yes. Okay. I'm going to Control X, Y, enter. We should probably restart the service for this one. So sudo service SSH restart. Okay, so we restarted the service. So now that took effect, so we should be able to, the SSH service is allowing us to connect. So let's see. Let's test this out. ifconfig 10024. So I'm going to SSH. How do I test this? By using root. So I do root at 10.0.2.15. See, it let me get through here. It's probably not, I don't think there's a password, so it's not going to let me log in. But it allowed me as far as this root. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that permit root log to no, and hopefully we won't get to this spot. You guys see that? Well, let me try that. I'm going to go here, reopen the file, sudo nano sshd. I'm going to go here and change this yes to no. Control X. Restart the service for this to take effect. Okay. So if I'm right, and I go here and I do this, I'm not going to get to the option of entering a password. So it should block me before that. Do you guys see the difference? So let's see if that happens. I don't know. Oh, didn't happen. Let me do a config. So I'm on 10.0.2.4. I did restart it. So if not to test this, then we're going to have to enable the root account. Okay, I'm going to try it again. Okay, I restarted it. Here. Yeah, it's letting me through. So how do we enable the root account then? We have to go back to the account management lab. Do you guys remember how to enable? You just did that lab, right? Was it just SU and then pass WD? Just did this, right? So I think it was to SU. Okay. User, okay. You said sudo pass WD? Yeah, okay. So maybe it was this. So let's do, I'm going to do the seed Ubuntu, or sorry, D's root, D's root. Okay. So SU root. I mistyped it. So again, D's root. Okay. So I'm in. So I have enabled the account. I'm going to test this again. So now this account should be enabled. So let's try it again. IF config. This is 10.0.2.15. I'm going to try from 10.0.2.4 to SSH. Okay. Okay, so I know the password now. It's D's root. Okay. So permission denied. Do you see that? So I'm going to try it one more time. Okay, it didn't work again. All right, so now just to make sure this is actually working, I'm going to change the configuration in the file and then repeat this exercise. So I'm gonna kill that. I need to go back to 10.0.2.15, right? IF config just to make sure. 10.0.2.15, got it. Now I need to go into this file. Oops. Oh, because I'm in root. It would be ls-l nano. Since I'm root, I don't need sudo sshd config. Okay, so I'm gonna go into this one, right? And all I need to do is comment it out. And then everything should go back to the way it was. Yeah, so, oh, actually, no. I need to, by default, it probably blocks it. So I had it as no. I need to set it as yes. So now I should be able to log in. Control X, Y, enter. Okay, hit clear. Restart the service. Sudo service SSH restart. Okay, so I've restarted it. So now I'm going to go back. So I should be able, so before it was denying me. So now let's see what happens. So if config 10024, and I'm going to now, okay, so D's root, and there you are. So you see how I'm able to log in into the machine. I do if config 10024. Got it, guys? Any questions? Pretty easy, right? All right, so this is bullets 31 through 41, right? So we've completed this exercise with root from 31 through 41. All right, so two problems essentially there that you have to provide screenshots for. And then on Wednesday, we will pick up here, prevent anyone from pinging your machine. So that's a good stopping point. So let me now go ahead and fix this. So I need to go back here. I want to remove this permission, right? So by default, that was off. So I'm just going to comment it out. Control X, Y. I'm going to restart SSH. Okay, restart it. I'm going to confirm by trying to do the same thing as before. Oh, uh-oh. Stayed up. All right, so I'm going to try it again from here, and this time it shouldn't work. I typed the wrong thing. Sorry. You can see permission denied, so that's good. So it's blocked again by default. So this machine is fine, 10024. Now let's go back to this machine. So one thing I should do is I need to disable the root account, especially because I gave it a password and I'm going to forget that password for sure. So I'm going to su seed, switch back to the normal account, ID. So I am back to seed. And then do you guys remember how to disable the root account? This was also in your previous lab. Do you guys remember? All right, so we can look it up. So my suggestion is when you add these things, rules and things, go back to the default setting just because you may cause a problem for you. I'll give you a scenario. In the past, we used to have these devices that were running on Linux. So students would SSH into the devices, the little boxes, configure IP tables and everything. The way that you update things is only through that interface of SSH. So some students sometimes by mistakes would block all SSH access to the machine. So at that point, they're blocked out forever and the device becomes what is called bricked. So you don't want to do that, right? So with this, it's probably not likely that it's going to occur, but just be careful is what I'm saying. When you add these rules, you could actually mess up the system a little bit. All right, so let's take a look at how to remove that root account. So it would have been here, right? In account management. This is the lab we did last week. Take a look at the Word document. And I know we looked at how to, enable it. And then here it says to disable the root account, use the following passwd syntax. So it just says sudo passwd-l lock, basically. So -l root, excuse me. So sudo pass WD-L root. All right, password expiry information changed. So that's good. Any questions, guys? So these labs, as you can see, a little bit harder, a little bit more abstract, definitely. Make sure you're practicing all of this, creating your cheat sheets, create on GitHub your own list of commands. But yeah, this is how we're gonna do things. Make sure, so I'm gonna stop the video here.